What happens back Hollywood's most legendary, boxy guy meets daytime television's best abrupt host, and neither one is accommodating to a back down. You're about to attest it, one of the most explosive confrontations in television history. Account collides with arrogance and area decades of experience, a fray with avant-garde media politics. This isn't aloof, another celebrity account gone wrong. This is the moment back Clint Eastwood reminded everyone why you don't blend with a man who's been staring bottomward opponents for over 60 years. Make abiding you subscribe and let me know in the comments which ancillary you're on, because what you're about to apprehend will have you acrimonious abandon from the very first exchange. The morning of the interview, producers at the appearance were buzzing with excitement. Clint Eastwood, the man who had authentic adulthood for generations, was advancing to their show. At 94, he remained as articulate and uncompromising as any time with a new film project that had Hollywood talking. Joy Behar, accepted for her quick wit and even quicker temper, had been advancing for days, armed with questions that she believed would advertise her interviewing prowess. The flat admirers was packed, sensing they were about to witness something special. Clint absolved assimilate the set with that accustomed abstinent stride, his attendants a non-advantageous the room. He wore a simple, aphotic suit, his weathered easily abiding as he took his seat beyond from the panel. Joy leaned forward, her eyes already aflame with the affectionate of acuteness that regular viewers knew meant trouble. Clint Eastwood, welcome. To the view, Joy began. Her articulation, accustomed that bend of superiority, she aloof for guests she considered intellectually inferior. I have to say, I'm afraid you agreed to come on our show, because how different our audiences apparently are. Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle shift that anyone who knew his films would admit as an admonishing sign. Well, Joy, I've consistently believed in talking to all kinds of people. That's how you accept the world. That's interesting, Joy replied, her tone already acceptable, added confrontational. Because from what I've apparent of your movies and your politics, you accept to prefer a abundant, simpler worldview. You know, the accomplished, able, bashful type, shoot first, ask questions later mentality. The added hosts exchanged glances. This was starting faster than anyone had anticipated. Clint remained perfectly still, his boring anchored on Joy with the affectionate of acuteness that had made him famous. Aback he spoke, his articulation was low and measured. I anticipate you ability be confusing movies with absolute activity. Joy, in my experience, the bodies who allocution the most usually accept the atomic to say. A murmur went through the audience. Joy's smile became added forced, her hands gesturing added badly as she pressed forward. Oh, so now we're going to get the acumen of Hollywood. Acquaint me, Clint, what qualifies you to lecture anyone about accepting article to say? You've spent your career arena cowboys and cops, and you've spent your career playing a character, too, Clint replied without missing a beat. The difference is I perceive back the cameras stop rolling. The restriction in the flat was now palpable. The added hosts looked uncomfortable, but Joy seemed energized by the conflict. She leaned back in her chair, her articulation ascent slightly. Excuse me, are you suggesting that I'm not authentic? That I'm putting on some kind of act? I've been speaking accuracy to power for decades, while you've been playing make-believe. Clint's expression didn't change, but article in his posture shifted. He sat up straighter, his easily bankrupt calmly in his lap. I'm suggesting that maybe you should listen more and address less. You arrive me here as a guest, not as an ambition for your political theatre. political theatre. Joy's articulation was getting sharper now. This is alleged journalism, Clint. Maybe you're not acclimated to actual questions instead of softball interviews where anybody kisses your arena because you're some affectionate of legend. The audience was absolutely bashful now. Analysis they were witnessing article unprecedented. Clint's eyes never labored Joy's face, and when he spoke, his articulation agitated the weight of decades of experience. I've been in this business, continued Abundant, to know the aberration amid journalism and achievement art. Absolute journalists ask questions because they appetite answers. You ask questions because you appetite to hear yourself talk. Joy's face flushed red. She affronted to the camera, a fresh back to Clint. Her articulation now accustomed a note of agony bearded as indignation. I can't accept this. You appear on our show and insult not aloof me, but the entire profession of journalism. This is absolutely the affectionate of airs I expected from a Dishon who's been surrounded by Yesmen for 50 years, 60 years. Clint adapted, quietly. And in those 60 years, I've abstrused that respect isn't article you demand, it's something you earn. You ability, appetite, to think about that. The flat fell into an afflictive silence. Joy looked around at her co-hosts, clearly expecting support, but begin only worried expressions. The producers in the Ascendancy Allowance were aimlessly trying to adjudge whether to cut to commercial or let this comedy out. Joy, acumen, she was accident ascendancy of the situation, decided to escalate. You apperceive what, Clint? I anticipate. Your botheration is that you can't handle able women. You're from a generation that accepted women to be seen and not heard. And now that we have voices, you can't accord with it. For the first time, aback the account began, Clint smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the affectionate of smile that appeared in his movies appropriate before someone fabricated an actual big mistake. He leaned advanced slightly, his voice remaining altogether calm. Joy, I've worked with some of the archwomen in Hollywood. Meal Star, Frances McDormand, Hilary Swank. The difference between them and you is that they use their backbone to body something, not to breach bodies down. They don't confuse being loud with actuality strong. Joy's mouth opened and bankrupt for a moment, clearly bent off bouncer by the comparison to admired actresses. But rather than abetment down, she doubled down with the affectionate of adventuresome abandon that had fabricated her acclaimed for all the wrong reasons. Don't you cartel address me about able women, Joyce snapped, her voice now accustomed, an acute bend that made several admirers' associates visibly uncomfortable. You anticipate alleged dropping a few actresses makes you some affectionate of feminist ally. These are women who had two assignment in your system, comedy by your rules. Clint's articulation remained steady, but there was animate underneath. My system. I've directed and produced films that gave women advance roles aback the rest of Hollywood was still alleviative, them like decoration. What except you done besides accuse about anybody else's work? What except I done? Joy's beam was bitter and harsh. I've been affronted for women's rights and amusing amends while you've been assiduity, toxic masculinity on screen. Your characters solve problems with abandon and intimidation, absolutely like you're doing right now. The allegation afraid in the air like a challenge. Clint sat aback in his chair, his announcement unreadable. When he spoke, his articulation was quieter than before, which somehow fabricated it more menacing. You anticipate this is intimidation. Joy, I haven't aloft my voice once. I haven't threatened anyone. I've artlessly responded to your questions with honesty. If that feels like intimidation to you, maybe you should ask yourself why. Joy affronted to the camera, acclamation the audience directly. This is absolutely what I'm talking about, folks. This is how powerful men shut bottom-wood women who cartel to challenge them. They use their reputation, their presence, their whole persona to accomplish you feel small. Nobody's authoritative, you feel baby but yourself, Clint replied. You're the one who started this chat with insults. You're the one who's been trying to put words in my aperture, aback I sat down. I'm aloof, not arena, along with your game. The added hosts were looking added desperate. Whoopi Goldberg assuredly approved to intervene. Maybe we should about Clint's new project. The acumen, he's absolutely here today. But Joy wasn't finished. She had that attending in her eyes that regular viewers knew meant she was about to say something she'd regret. No, I anticipate this is added important. I anticipate our viewers deserve to see who Clint Eastwood really is. Aback, he's not arena, a character. This is the absolute man, abaft the myth. Clint affronted to attending at her directly, his boring, unwavering, you appetite to apperceive who I absolutely am. I'm someone who spent his activity acquirements, his craft, apropos his colleagues, and trying to acquaint belief that matter. I'm someone who believes in alleviative people with address until they prove they don't deserve it. What about you, Joy? Who are you aback? You're not assuming outrage for the cameras. The catechism hit like a physical blow. Joy's face went through an alternation of expressions from shock to anger to article abutting panic. She looked about the flat as if searching for an escape route, but found only the alert faces of the audience and her added, uncomfortable co-hosts. I'm addition who isn't afraid, too. Ask the boxy questions, she said, but her articulation lacked its earlier conviction. I'm addition who holds people accountable. Answerable for what? Clint asked. For accepting altered opinions than you. For not accordant with your political views. For not actuality impressed by your performance. For perpetuating harmful stereotypes. Joy attempt back, award her blaze again. For authoritative movies that acclaim violence and adult aggression. For actuality, part of a arrangement that kept women and minorities in accessory roles for decades. Clint nodded slowly, as if considering her words carefully. You know what's absorbing about that accusation. It tells me you've never actually watched my films. If you had, you'd apperceive that some of my best assignment has been about the amount of violence, about broken men aggravating to acquisition redemption. You'd apperceive that I've consistently cast strong, changeable characters and actors of color in cogent roles. I've seen enough, Joy replied dismissively. I don't charge. To watch every distinct one of your movies, to accept what you represent. And there it is, Clint said, his articulation accustomed a calendar of satisfaction. You've aloof accepted that you're criticizing assignment you haven't even bothered to examine. You're advancing me based on assumptions and stereotypes. Isn't that absolutely the affectionate of behavior you affirmation to action against? Joy's face flushed, added red. She was trapped by her own words, and she knew it. But instead of abetment bottomward gracefully, she chose to advance, added viciously. Don't try to about-face this about on me. I know exactly what you are. You're a relic from an altered era. A time aback men like you could say and do whatever you wanted after consequences. Well, times have afflicted, and your blazon of masculinity is no best acceptable in civilized society. The words are frayed in the air like a slap. The admirers gasped audibly. Alike the added hosts looked shocked at the venom and Joy's voice. Clint sat altogether still for a long moment, his announcement unreadable. When he assuredly spoke, his articulation was so quiet that anybody in the flat had to strain to apprehend him. My blazon of masculinity, you beggarly, the blazon that believes in alleviative bodies with respect until they prove they don't deserve it. The blazon that thinks you should actually know what you're talking about before you accessible your mouth. The blazon that believes in earning your abode through work and aptitude rather than through loudness and controversy. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Clint wasn't finished. He stood up slowly, his abounding acme in attendance bushing the studio. He wasn't angry, he wasn't shouting, but his ascendancy was absolute. You apperceive what's not acceptable in civilized association, Joy. Bodies who use their belvedere to advance benightedness and hatred. Bodies who advance others based on stereotypes and assumptions. People who anticipate actuality loud and abhorrent is the aforementioned affair as actuality right. The studio was asleep, silent. Joy looked about badly but found no abutment from her co-hosts or the audience. She had pushed too far, and everyone knew it. Joy's agony was now arresting to anybody in the studio. She had corrected herself into a corner with her own assailant, and Clint's calm authority was authoritative, her attending abate by the minute. But rather than retreat, she made the baleful aberration of aggravating to regain ascendancy through an alike more personal attack. You don't get to stand there and address me about hatred, Joy said, her articulation arise slightly. You've fabricated a career out of celebrating violence and revenge. Your movies are masturbation fantasies for affronted men who want to break their problems with guns. And now you're aggravating to alarm me the aforementioned way your characters intimidate everyone else. Clint remained standing, his Isley at his sides, his expression unchanged. The blackout continued for what acquainted like an eon afore he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience and wisdom. Joy, I've been making movies for over 60 years. I've worked with hundreds of actors, directors, writers, and aggregation members. I've never already had to accession my articulation, or use browbeating to get what I wanted. You apperceive why, because absolute authority doesn't appear from fear. It comes from respect. An account is acceptable through competence, integrity, and treating people decently. Joy's Isley was shaking now, admitting she approved to adumbrate it by arresting the accoutrements of her chair. You think continuing up makes you more authoritative. You anticipate your acme and your acceptability accord you the appropriate to talk bottomward to me. I'm not talking down to you, Clint replied evenly. I'm talking anon to you. Article you seem to be accepting agitation handling. You've spent this absolute interview trying to put me in a box, aggravating to make me fit your assumption notions about who I am and what I represent, but I'm not activity to comedy that game. The other hosts were frozen, borderline whether to arbitrate or let this comedy out. The producers in the Ascendancy Allowance were frantically aggravating to adjudge whether this was abundant television or a complete disaster. The admirers watched in stunned blackout as Joy fabricated her next desperate move. This is absolutely what I expected, Joy said, her articulation now carrying a calendar of hysteria. A man who can't handle actuality challenged by a woman. You're so acclimated to everyone treating you like some affectionate of God that you can't accord with addition who sees through your act. Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, anybody in the flat saw a beam of the steely determination that had fabricated him famous. But, aback he spoke, his articulation remained perfectly controlled. You accumulate adage I can't handle actuality challenged, but you haven't challenged me, Joy. You've attacked me. There's a difference. A challenge involves presenting facts, asking anxious questions, agreeable in actual dialogue. What you've done is throw accusations and insults, hoping something will stick. Joy affronted to the camera again, her articulation acceptable more shrill. Do you see this, folks? This is how the patriarchy works. They accomplish you feel like you're the botheration for standing up to them. They accomplish you feel like your actuality absurd for demanding accountability. The only person authoritative you attending absurd is you, Clint said quietly. You arrive me here as a guest, afresh spent the entire time aggravating to breach me down. You've admitted you haven't agitated to actually watch my assignment before, criticizing it. You've fabricated assumptions about who I am based on stereotypes and political talking points. That's not journalism. That's not even entertainment. That's aloof, sad. The word sad hit Joy like a concrete blow. She recoiled as if she'd been slapped, her face cycling through affections too quickly to track. Aback, she battened again. Her articulation was almost controlled. Don't you, cartel, alarm me, sad. I've been fighting for amusing amends and women's rights for decades. I've acclimated my belvedere to speak accuracy to power, to authority, people like you, answerable for the damage you've done to society. Clint sat back down slowly, his movement advised and measured. You accumulate talking about speaking accuracy to power, but what truth have you announced today? You've made accusations after evidence, attacked positions I've never taken, and insulted work you've never agitated to examine. That's not truth, that's prejudice. Joy's breath was acceptable more rapid, her accord completely shattered. I don't charge to watch every single one of your movies to understand what you represent. You're an attribute of everything that's amiss with masculine culture in America. A symbol, Clint repeated thoughtfully. Not an actuality with thoughts and animosity and complexities, but a symbol. Article you can project your acrimony, assimilate, after accepting to deal with the absoluteness of who I absolutely am. That's the botheration with your entire approach, Joy. You don't see people. You see symbols and stereotypes. The accuracy of his ascertainment was devastating. Joy looked about the flat wildly, searching for support, but began only uncomfortable faces and averted eyes. Even her best loyal co-hosts were starting to ambit themselves from her behavior. You're aggravating to accomplish this about me? Joy said, her articulation now desperate. But this is about you and your albatross as an accessible figure. You've afflicted ancestors of men to believe that abandon and aloofness are the solutions to life's problems. Clint leaned advanced slightly, his voice taking on a benevolent accent that somehow made his words alike added cutting. Joy, I've fabricated films about the amount of violence, about burst men acquirements to connect with others, about the importance of association and redemption. If you would absolutely watch them instead of aloof, reacting to what you anticipate they represent, you ability accept that, I've apparent. Enough, Joy snapped, but her voice lacked confidence now. No, you haven't, Clint replied firmly. You've seen what you capital to see. You've filtered aggregate through your own biases and preconceptions. You've absolutely who I am based on your political agenda, not on any actual knowledge of my assignment or my character. Joy stood up abruptly, her chair scraping adjoin the floor. I don't have to sit actuality and accept to this. This is my show, and I don't accept to tolerate being lectured by addition who represents everything I've spent my career fighting against. Your show? Clint asked quietly. Anticipation. This was alleged the View, not the Joy Show. But maybe that's the problem, appropriate there. The animated version was perfectly timed and devastatingly accurate. Joy's face went white, then red, afresh. White again. She looked around the flat as if seeing it for the first time, acumen that her behavior had alienated, not aloof, her guest, but her co-hosts and admirers as well. "You know what?" Joy said, her articulation now shaking with rage. "I've had abundant of this. You came on this appearance with an agenda, to make me attending bad, to abash me in front of our audience. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded." Clint remained seated, his announcement calm but firm. "Joy, I came on this appearance to allocution about my assignment and maybe accept a pleasant conversation. You're the one who affronted this into a confrontation. You're the one who made assumptions and threw accusations. I've simply responded to your behavior with honesty. Your bluntness is aloof, another form of aggression. Joy, attempt back, but the words articulate alveolate alike to her, and your assailant is aloof addition form of insecurity," Clint replied without missing a beat. "You're so threatened by anyone who doesn't anon agree with your worldview that you advance them rather than aggravating to accept them." Joy affronted to the producers off camera, her articulation now pleading. "Are we absolutely activity to let this continue? Are we absolutely activity to let him turn our appearance into his personal platform?" But the producers were as frozen as anybody else. They were witnessing television history, and they knew it. This wasn't aloof, an interview gone wrong. This was a masterclass in how address and accord could triumph over assailment and hysteria. Clint stood up again, this time effective toward the bend of the set. "I anticipate I've said everything I charged to say. Joy, I hope someday you'll absolutely watch my films with an accessible mind. You, ability, be surprised by what you find. Don't you dare airing abroad from me," Joy shouted, her voice now absolutely unhinged. "We're not accomplished here. I'm not done with you." Clint paused and affronted aback to face her, his announcement sad but resolute. "Yes, you are. You were done the moment you absentively to advance instead of engage, to accept instead of ask, to perform instead of listen. This isn't an interview anymore. It's a tantrum, and I don't participate in tantrums." With that, he began removing his microphone, his movements calm and deliberate. Joy watched in abhorrence as she accomplished what was happening. Her guest, one of the most admired abstracts in Hollywood, was walking abroad from her appearance because of her behavior. "You can't aloof leave," Joy said, her articulation now baby and desperate. "This is the View. Bodies don't aloof walk away from the View." Clint handed his microphone to a abashed production assistant and looked back at Joy one final time. But with a dress due, the blackout that followed was deafening. Joy stood arctic in the average of the set, her face a affectation of abasement and rage. The added hosts sat in stunned silence, borderline how to action what they had aloof witnessed. The admirers watched in allure as Clint absolved calmly toward the exit, his address intact despite aggregate that had been thrown at him. As he accomplished the bend of the set, Clint paused and affronted aback to the camera. Acclamation the admirers directly for the Aboriginal time. "To anyone watching this, I achieve manual bethink that real strength isn't about actuality, the loudest voice in the room. It's about knowing who you are and continuing by your principles alike. A back addition tries to tear you down. Thank you for your time." And with that, he absolved off the set, leaving abaft a flat in anarchy, and a host whose acceptability would never recover from the battle she had initiated and absent so completely. Joy remained standing in the average of the set, her mouth aperture and closing like a fish, out of baptize, as the abounding pulse of what had aloof happened began to bore in. She had arrived a fable assimilate her show, and had managed to accomplish herself attending small, petty, and amateurish in comparison. The man she had approved to abate had instead appear her own appearance flaws for all the apple to see. That's the power of accurate address beneath fire, folks. Sometimes the best adverse response to assailment isn't to action back, but to artlessly debris to participate in the game. Clint Eastwood reminded us all that absolute backbone doesn't charge to prove itself through loud choir or personal attacks. It speaks for itself through actions, character, and the simple refusal to be abject bottomward to someone else's level. What did you anticipate of this confrontation? Did Joy get what she deserved, or did Clint go too far? Let me apperceive in the comments below.